Welcome to Caleb Can't Read. I am Jordan Rabel.
I'm Caleb Terrence.
I've got another segue for you.
You fucking liar.
Do you know what an awl is? AWL.
Awl. Some kind of tool.
Correct. You've done this. You've done a lot of your weird kinky sexual leather works. When you were making sexy costumes and shit.
Yeah. I forget what it is. I don't know.
It punches holes in leather.
Oh yeah, that bit. The punchy bit?
The punchy bit. What did you call it when you were making your kink wear?
I didn't fucking call it anything. I just fucking used it.
You didn't summon it like some sort of wizard?
No, I didn't have like an assistant. I'm not yelling for people to get my tools and just pulling shit out of a fucking drawer. I don't even know what it's called.
I don't know. That's kind of untrue. I mean, I think you probably do it more in a drunken slur so that when you're passed down on my couch and I go, Caleb, you need anything? And you go, ah! And I'm like, all right, I'll get you some water.
Well, it's mostly just snoring. That's dishonest. Come on now.
Your snoring is nothing compared to mine.
Or your wife's.
Yeah.
Holy shit, the two of you, dude. It's
oh
pretty
my god,
intense.
dude, it's like a fucking bear cave.
No, dude, I
nuts.
have been in your fucking library sleeping. And you and your wife have been sleeping in your bedroom next to it. And you guys have been so fucking loud and the tone has been so like frightening that I have jolted up and thought we were getting like robbed. Like, and been genuinely scared in the middle of the night. Like gotten up, thrown pants on, and then it's like taken my brain a second to like calm down.
A really gruff man without pants.
Oh no, a real man!
He's broken into my home.
Possibly several.
He's just yelling. Well, fuck it. Let's get started, shall we? Louis Braille was born January 4th.
Segues fucking suck.
1809 in Couvray, France, to Simon René and his mother Monique.
Who?
Louis Braille is his name.
Okay.
Ring a bell?
The
family...
quite put my finger on it.
The family was fairly well off. They had a lot of land, including a vineyard, thanks to Simon René's profitable business making horse equipment as a leatherer. As soon as he was able to waddle, Louis was able to walk around the property freely, which, yes, dangerous, since the Braille property was sitting on 3 hectares of wilderness, but Louis also had 3 siblings to watch over him. Monique Catherine, who was 16 years older, Louis Simon, 14 years older, and Marie Celine, 12 years older. But keeping an eye on little Louis only worked well for them for 3 years, until it disastrously didn't. Since it was the early 1800s, there was no such thing as fun, so you had to make your own. This was easy.
Was it a hawk?
Huh?
The disaster?
A hawk?
Yeah, did a hawk come get the kid or something?
What the fuck did you grow up? How did you grow up?
Oh,
yeah, you have fought wild dogs before, haven't you? Now, finding fun was easy for Louis, who found plenty of sharp and shiny objects in his father's workshop to play with. Well, in 1812, when Louis was 3 years old, he played a little game that I'm sure he called hole punching leather, because that's what it was, and those were the rules. And this is where an awl comes in. For those of you who don't know, again, an awl is basically just a sharp piece of metal with a handle on it so you can use it to punch leather. Make little holes in the straps so you can make like a belt or something. I hope you like where this is going. So there's little...
Is he gonna squanch?
He's gonna goof it. So there's little Louis, alone, hole punching a piece
requires a partner.
Hole punching a piece of leather.
We're talking about kids.
Just like good old dad. And he can't really seem to get the awl to punch this particularly slippery strap of leather. So he gets his face real fucking close. When, of course, the awl slips and punctures his eye. Now, I looked it up just for accuracy's sake, but we actually don't know which eye was struck. It's been completely lost to record for some reason. Well, anyway, a local physician was called up, but again, it being the 1800s in rural France, only did what he could. In this case, he put a patch over the kid's eye, wrapped some gauze around his head, and suggested that the family go to Paris for someone with better medical knowledge than he. Now, the town of Coupvray, where the Braille family lived, is only about 20 miles from Paris, so I don't know what time of the day the accident happened, but they waited until the next day to go see a surgeon in Paris. So chances are that the accident happened sometime in the afternoon, and I don't know, hospitals were just closed. I can't imagine how fucking scary that was to wait for hours like that all fucking night to finally go get the kid some help the next day.
Yeah.
This actually kind of not in this, of course, exact circumstance, but when I was like fucking 11, I was at like my cousin's graduation party, and we were playing this age-old, timeless classic of Pinecone Fight. And my brother, who's 14 years older than me, like, as I was picking up a pine cone, I turned my head to look over at him as he, like, I just see the pine cone spinning straight for me, and it hit me straight into my fucking eye. And I went completely blind in that eye for a long time. My fucking pupil was, like, dripping.
Nice.
Yeah. We had to go see a hospital, and holy shit, dude, that was so fucking terrifying. Like, I was bleeding out of, like, my eyes, my nose, my mouth, and everything, because it's all fucking connected, but I was hit fucking hard. My vision did come back, but, like, your balance doesn't come back for a long time. Like, as soon as you're struck blind in one eye, you're fucking waddling around like you're 2 days old.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I had a little toy gun that shot these little foam discs, and I wanted to see how it worked.
Oh, I remember those things. The thing where you stack them on top and
yeah. In order to see how it worked, I figured the best way would be putting my eye on the barrel and pulling the trigger.
Well, did you see how it worked?
No. I didn't see it for a little bit.
Was your mom upset you spaghetti?
Yeah, she was real pissed.
Idiot. Yeah. Well, the idea was actually to be able to save Louis' eye at this point, but unfortunately, not even the surgeon in Paris was able to do anything about it. Now, I know they used cocaine and heroin a lot for, like, pain medication back then, but I don't think they actually gave any to a 3-year-old.
Why would they not?
I mean,
how long ago just in this fucking country were we, like, giving kids alcohol to help them sleep?
Well, here's the thing. We still know meth is bad, but we still put a little bit in our medicine, but we're not giving it... Well, actually, we are giving
Adderall
it to
is
kids.
meth.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
So.
Okay. Well, you know, they may have known it was too much for even him back then. I don't know.
No, they didn't.
Okay. Fuck it. Maybe Louis Braille had some fucking coke in his system.
I would bet everything you're about to pay me to house sit for you that they 100% would have given that to a child. 100 fucking percent.
Well, either way, whether they gave the kid any medicine or not at all, Louis laid awake in pain for several weeks. His damaged eye became severely infected.
Wait, what time is this?
This is 1812.
Okay.
Yeah. His damaged eye became severely infected, slowly spreading the contamination.
Because they didn't put any cocaine on it.
To his other eye.
Oh.
By the time he was 5, Louis Braille was completely blind. Now, what's really sad about this... What? Why is that funny? Why is that a good thing to you? You like blinding kids?
I'm just picturing, like, whatever random fucking bumfuck doctor diagnosis they gave him when they, pulled open the bandage on a kid and it was just a fucked up ass eye. Diagnosis, super gross. Send him home.
That's true.
Should we clean it or something? Just throw some water on it. Oh, that hurt him. All right. It looks like everything I'm going to do is going to hurt him. Just get him out of here.
Was there a cocaine in that water? No, just poo-poo, because it's 1812.
No. God damn it, this is poop water.
Well, what's really sad about him, like, taking 2 years to get fully blind in the other eye, since his sight was in one working eye and was taking gradually over the course of 2 years, Louis would just walk around, like, and constantly ask, "Why is it so dark?" Like...
I don't know, Lou.
That's so fucking sad.
Yeah, it is dark out here. Fucking weird, bud.
Nobody told him. Fuck, that's sad. Now, as it turns out, it was quite common back in the day to either just tell your kids sorry and leave them at, like, a mental institution for nurses to take care of them for the rest of their lives, or you just drop your kid off in town and have them beg for money on a street corner, and then you pick them up at the end of the day. Like, earn a little extra income. Those were your two fucking options.
I don't know. Which one's more dangerous?
The mental institution, 100%.
I don't know, dude.
The fatality rate is horrible.
I mean, I know they didn't have vans back then, but I know they had a harder time catching down diddlers, so, like,
What, to just pick up kids?
Yeah. How easy would it be to pick up a blind kid? That's dangerous as hell.
Well, true, yes. But, yeah. I mean, I feel like the death rate from diddling is pretty low compared to that of a mental institution.
Do you think they were tracking that back then?
Fair.
I don't know if we have public record of
this
that.
This is a really specific poll. Are you okay?
Just saying, like... Well, I think that may be more dangerous to the mental institution. Like,
I don't know.
Just leave your kid alone in the middle of town all day?
We don't need to go into this, but do you really think they're not diddling kids in the fucking mental institution, too?
Fair.
Okay. Now, look... We are 50-50 on this. That's fine.
We're just going to drop that there. Not
This could get a lot fucking darker. Well, fortunately for Louis, his parents were actually human. His father, Simon Rene, fashioned several different canes for Louis, and he soon learned to take care of himself. His parents taught him how to walk the trails around their property and how to navigate around town. That's fucking dangerous. They have like, what did I say, like 3-5 hectares of land or something like that? That's a lot of wilderness to get. It's a lot of acres, fucking basically. Fucking hectares. Well, he even went to school in Couvray for a little bit. Apparently, he was a star student, doing what he could to earn a normal education. Like, he still learned to spell, even though he knew he'd never be able to read. Shit like that.
How do you
learn to spell?
Okay, I'm not really a good one to question this.
Because you're just blind. Please. You could just be like, hey, how do you spell cat? C-A-T. Cool. How do those letters look? I don't know. You know? I mean, you could still do it, I guess, you know? But by the time Louis was 10 years old in 1819, he was transferred to Paris to live on the grounds of the National Institute of the Working Blinds. Established 34 years prior in 1785 by a man named Valentin Howie, and originally called the Royal Institute of Blind Youth, Howie built the school as a testing ground to prove his method for allowing the blind to read really worked. He and his brother Rene were tremendous philanthropists for their time. His brother Rene actually helped develop the metric system we have today. And Valentin, while he himself was not blind, spent practically his whole life trying to help those that were. His inspiration came when he was at a religious festival and saw a group of blind people cornered by a crowd and then given instruments and dunce caps and were forced to play music. So sad.
Jordan.
I'm so sorry. I try not to laugh. God damn it. That's so fucking horrible.
Jordan, what the fuck, man?
It's just the meanest fucking thing. It's like putting a kick me sign on that fucking wheelchair kid. Like, that's so mean, dude. And they didn't know how to play, of course. It was just insanely shitty. Well, Valentin knew that the blind are just like anyone else, but constantly being used as the butt of everybody's jokes. So he would try to develop a method for the blind to read, to at least keep them educated and on an even intellectual playing field as everyone else. His basis for this method would be something called night reading. Basically, during war, French soldiers would keep getting picked off at night because they had to light lanterns to read messages, giving away their positions. But with embossed lettering on pages made by wetting paper and letting it dry over brass letters, the soldiers could read in the dark using their fingertips to trace the words. Now, this was extremely complex and quickly abandoned, but Howie knew that this would be the best choice for those who are blind. I can't imagine, like, the amount of time it took to write a message that's just, like, retreat. Like, how long is this going to take? At least 45 minutes. They're dead.
No, you just put run.
It still takes a while. You can't hand it to them while the paper's still wet, you know? Like, what does it say? I don't know.
Couldn't they just, like, whisper and pass it down the line? Like,
maybe that's why it was...
Gotta have a message. No, we don't, dude. If we have to run right now, just yell run.
Maybe that's why the French kept getting picked off at night and no other troops were. They're just like, oh, but a game of telephone is just really fucking terrible for them, too. You're passing it down a line of 100 men, like... We need to retreat. Pass it down.
Wait, light the lamp? Okay, lighting the lamp. No!
We need to retreat. Pass it down. And it just gets to the final guy like, what the fuck does he need bread for? Like, in 1784, Valentin Howie would meet a young 12-year-old beggar named Francois Lesueur, who would become his first student 13 years after he began developing his method. Just a year later, Howie showed off Francois' abilities to read to King Louis XVI, where Howie's idea for a school for the blind received funding, allowing him to house and teach 120 students at any one time. Unfortunately, just 6 years later, in 1791, the French Revolution erupted, and after the royalty was thoroughly beheaded, the purse strings to the school were cut as well. And since Valentin Howie got to know the king better over time and was fluent in 10 languages, he had become the official translator to the king when he was killed. Howie was quickly branded a terrorist by the revolutionaries and jailed, but was eventually released. Probably a little tortured. And yet, the school itself was still kept open. Though at this time, the school was smart enough to drop the word royal from the title, eventually changing the name completely from the Royal Institute of Blind Youth to the National Institute of Working Blinds. Now, by the time
Why not just Institute of Blind Youth?
You gotta know that they're working, you know? Yeah, we're putting them to hard labor. It's funnier that way.
Good.
We're making them learn to play music in dunce caps. Now, by the time,
Jordan.
I'm sorry. Look, I know he was offended, but those people had a really funny idea and they went with it. All I'm saying. Anyway, by the time Louis Braille had attended the school, they had changed locations from a nice building that the king could afford to a former prison. The school was now underfunded, cold, and had one working bathroom, where the students were given a bath only once a month.
Sounds like my house.
Are you the prisoner, a student, or...
Oh.
Yeah. Well, though this had less to do with the kids not being able to find the bathroom and more to do with the school's director, Sebastian Gilly. The school's conditions were not improved solely because he didn't want to pay for it. He also had a long history of beating the students as well.
Oh.
Yeah, beating blind kids, just why, dude?
But I don't really think... No reasoning there.
No, none at all. Like, he's literally doing it for fun. Like, that's...
Just for shits and giggles.
Pretty much. But the school would be reformed just a couple years later in 1821 when Sebastian Gilly was found to be the bastard he was and fired. The school's founder, Valentin Howie, would only get to see small improvements made to his school before passing away the next year in 1822 at the age of 76. Now, the National Institute of the Working Blinds, of course, taught Howie's method at the school, which he himself established. His method, the one he had worked on for 14 years before presenting it to the king, was to just emboss regular letters on paper, but a little bigger and spaced out a bit more.
It seems like the obvious thing.
It did work to some degree, but progress was extremely slow for readers because in the dark, some letters may feel the same as others, and if a word didn't make sense, you had to just go back to the beginning and try again.
Sounds really expensive as well.
Yes, yeah.
Just materials-wise for doing that.
You would have to pretty much create a line of people to basically, wet the pages, put them on the lettering, and, let them dry.
Arrange them all. Racks. And there's no way you could just have, an entire book's worth of, letters and
exactly.
shit. You'd have to just arrange it, page to page.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I'll bring that point up a little bit later on. And since the letters had to be larger and spaced apart, it meant that the books printed... Oh, we're getting to it right now. The books printed using Howie's method were on heavier, bigger paper, and the resulting books were fucking huge and weighed a ton. In fact, these books were so costly to manufacture that when the school first opened, their library had a total of 3 books. And to people that could see, like Howie himself, there was no better way for the blind to read. He had perfected the method. But writing was...
No room for improvement here.
Yeah, literally. But writing was a whole other issue. The kids could read, but there was no sense in having them learn to write, since they wouldn't be able to reproduce the large amount of work it took to write something out using Howie's method. They're not going to know how to fucking put the lettering on the brass things and then go ahead and fucking wet the pages, put them on, dry them. Mm. But for Louis Braille, his father sent him to school with leather pieces shaped like letters that he'd manufactured so Louis could trace around them and be able to write letters to send back home. Now, back in 1815, a little before Louis Braille even went to the Institute, there was a man named Charles Barbier who created a simplified form of writing that was utterly stupid. Basically, what it was a series of dots in a 5x5 grid to create a letter. So basically, it was his own alphabet using dots. And his reasoning behind completely changing the alphabet was that the literacy rate in France was very small for poor people and those in rural communities. So to him, learning this dot system would be easier than learning all the numerous shapes of the regular alphabet.
You got to think like a poor person, see?
But that's like trying to get people to learn Morse code instead of English because you think it's easier to learn. It's not. You still have to learn the fucking patterns.
Look, man, they just lack
stupid.
the elegance that it takes to speak the English language. That's why they're poor. So, little dots.
You want to hear my impression of a poor person? Duh!
I think they'll like the dots, and it's going to waste less ink.
Yeah. I mean, it's already wasted on them. But Charles Babbage did have one good idea with his new writing system. He wanted to emboss all writings using his alphabet into paper so that there was one uniform page for everyone, the sighted and the blind. So if everybody learns, like if you can read a book and can immediately hand it to your blind friend, he'd be able to read the same book. As long as everyone's using Babbage's pages, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Charles Babbage
okay
asked...
there, bud?
Yep.
Okay.
Charles Babbage...
I told you not to have that 9.5% cider. You didn't fucking listen, did you?
I like it.
I know you do. Of course you do. You know why? Because it's 9.5%. You know why I told you not to drink it?
This is 9.5?
Yes.
No, it's good. It's delicious. It's yummy.
Weird.
Now, Charles Babbage asked the National Institute of Working Blinds to trial his system back when it was being run by Sebastian Gill, the abusive headmaster. But Sebastian was only in the opinion that since the school was founded by Valentin Howie, the students should learn the Howie system only. But once Sebastian Gilly was kicked out, Babbage asked again, and this time was successful. Louis Braille was one of those to test the system, and it became very popular very quickly. Not only was it easier to read the dots than to try feeling the difference between like an O and a Q, but the students now had a method to take notes as well. Because Charles Babbage not only introduced a method of reading, but invented a tablet that would allow you to take notes in class by basically putting a piece of paper over a board with these little raised points on it, and then the kids would be able to feel out the dots they want to make and use an awl to prick holes in the paper. I'm sure Babbage hated this, but these little dots were eventually called Braille cells instead of Babbage cells. Anyway.
Thank God.
The Babbage system was a huge step forward from the Howie method, but it wasn't streamlined enough for Louis Braille, who would, of course, perfect the system. I hope you do know who he is at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking. Because the Babbage method...
How wild would that be if, like, I had just thought this whole time there were weird little dots on everything?
What?
Like, you know, in public transit, elevators, if I just, this whole time, and then you just blew
just
my
like,
fucking mind.
Just like behind each, like, printed letter, the printers also put little dots. You just never thought to put your hand on a page of printed paper.
It's not what I
You
meant.
didn't know? Well, it wasn't streamlined enough for Louis Braille, because the Babbage method wasn't without its faults. For instance, sometimes a letter could take up to 12 dots to make, which is a little hard to count under the feeling of one finger. It also didn't go by a letter system. Instead of, say, 2 dots in a row symbolizing the letter B, it symbolized the letter B. So you had to use phonetic sound to try and figure out what the fuck it says on paper, which is stupid. Do you get what I mean by that?
No.
So basically what it was like, you wouldn't have like 3 of Babbage's letters to spell out cat. You wouldn't have a C, an A, and a T. You would have maybe 2 letters because one of them says cat and the other says tuh, and then you'd have to read along with it and figure out, oh, it says cat, you know, like that. It was all phonetic lettering.
Well, if they don't sound funny, how are you going to keep laughing at
You
it?
have to read out loud the entire time and it sounds stupid. I like a Gundam wing. It was on last night. Like, that sounds stupid.
Yeah, it does.
Well, there was also room in Babbage's alphabet for punctuation or math symbols. But that's not to say that Charles Babbage completely failed with his creation. He created the tablet, which even today is used as a way for the blind to write, and ultimately, his alphabet walked so Braille's could run. But throughout his years at school, Louis Braille thought that there could be a more efficient way of reading for the blind. As he said, quote,
Maybe we can structure this in the same way that we've made the alphabet. And maybe their brains work the same way as the other kids.
kill him!
And that's fine. They just can't see the fucking letters, so like...
He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's blind. Dumbass. Quote, access to communication in the widest sense is access to knowledge. And that is vitally important if we are not to go on being despised or patronized by condescending sighted people. We do not need pity, nor do we need to be reminded we are vulnerable. We must be treated as equals, and communication is the way this can be brought about.
Yeah, fuck the normies.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, saying sighted people, he's a little ableist, you know? It's like,
what?
I don't need to be called out like that.
Shut the fuck up. Read.
Well, within just a few years of the Babier method being taught at the Institute, Braille created his own version of the alphabet in 1824, when he was just 15 years old. But this version wasn't without its faults either. Although the number of dots it took to spell a letter was halved from 12 to 6, Braille also used dashes as well as dots for his system, which were really hard to discern by touch. Coincidentally, his original alphabet would look a lot like Morse code, but that wouldn't be developed for about another 10 years, completely unrelated. Well, in 1829, at the age of 20, Braille published a book on his new method called Procedure for Writing Words, Music, and Plainsong in Dots, because he also wrote music. But with it all being nothing more than a theory that it would work, it gained little recognition. Now, like I'd mentioned before, Louis Braille was a great student, but here at the National Institute of the Working Blinds, he quickly absorbed the curriculum, quickly becoming the teacher's aide. By 1833, at the age of 24, Louis Braille graduated into a full-time professorship at the school, teaching history, geometry, and algebra to the other students. And now with him as a teacher, he could implement his own system to test on students, and the school let him give it a shot. The students that vetted his method quickly found fault with the dashes in the script, which, as mentioned before, were hard to discern from the dots. And through trial and error, Braille created an updated version, including a way to read music notes and mathematical equations. 12 years later, in 1839, Louis Braille would publish his second book, called New Method for Representing by Dots the Forms of Letters, Maps, Geometric Figures, Musical Symbols, etc., for use by the blind.
Wow.
It's a good title.
Yeah.
Catchy. Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
Well, after the release of the book, which demonstrated a more perfected system of writing, Louis tried to have it introduced to the Institute as a whole, not just on a small sample of students. However, much like the previous director of the school, the latter ones had no intention of diverting away from founder Valentin Howey's work. In fact, they were openly hostile about it. When a teacher saw merit in Braille's method and had a history book copied into Braille, the school kicked the teacher out. No idea why they were fine with Babier's method being taught, but maybe they weren't happy about that either. Well,
this just means we're going to have to do more work, and that's unacceptable.
Well, regardless, Braille, as it would simply be called, would not be taught at the Institute while Louis was still alive. On a happier note, the school had music classes teaching the organ and cello starting in 1826, and by the same year that Louis became a teacher in 1833, they started sending their students out to churches all over Paris to play for the congregation, including Louis Braille. And Louis, a devout Catholic, fucking loved it. He played for the Church of Saint Nicolas des Champs from the years of 1834 to 1839 before moving on to the newly built Church of Saint Vincent de Paul a few years later. Although Louis Braille would die without knowing his reading and writing method would later be used the world over, he was happy as an accomplished and recognized organ player, and he did actually compose a few of his own things, though I didn't give a shit to actually listen.
Wow.
I won't lie, I do not give a shit.
Why would you...
It just sounds like he's hitting notes at random because he can't fucking see.
It's just kind of weird, man. I mean, if I were you, I wouldn't have presented that in that way. I just wouldn't have said anything about it.
You know what? It was fucking great.
And
tremendous.
Then just glossed over
It's my fucking ringtone.
Instead of bringing attention to the fact that you are indeed a lazy piece of shit.
It wasn't laziness. I don't give a fuck about organ music.
I mean...
I do not give a shit.
It's just a weird, you're in a hole, stop digging, you know what I mean?
Well, anyway, there we go. In 1843, the Institute would move into a building connected with a hospital with much better conditions. Remember, they were in a fucking prison the whole time, former prison. At the very least, this meant that doctors could see students at the school whose conditions were worsening, and it probably meant that they had more than one bathroom now. Louis Braille would later work with a man named Pierre-François Victor Vauquelin on his invention of a typewriter that would allow the blind to type manuscripts like anybody else rather than the slow method they were used to with a tablet and an awl. But the invention itself wouldn't be completed for quite some time. I'm sorry, I have to go back to that. 120 fucking students plus staff, and you have to share one fucking bathroom.
I mean...
God, I hope that... I'm sure some people bought buckets, just for... they had to.
I don't know. It's like phrasing, there's only one bathroom. You don't have to always use the bathroom.
Mm-hmm. It is 1800s Paris. I would figure you would just piss out the window.
There's got to be a window somewhere. That's what I'm saying.
I hope so. Fuck.
I bet you there were buckets.
There's got to be buckets. Everyone had a bucket
One
in the 1800s.
fucking bathroom? Get the fuck out of here.
Do you know how many fucking buckets people had back then?
I'm not walking across
so many
fucking
buckets.
campus for a toilet. I'm going to fucking pee outside. I'm not...
There had to be so many fucking buckets back in the day. I mean, honestly, whenever you look at a period piece or something, there's a random-ass bucket. Like, just a wood bucket in the corner somewhere.
Yeah.
What do they use it for? Could be a bathroom. Could be water. Could be puke. Doesn't matter. Everyone had different buckets for different things.
Buckets.
These are my walking buckets. I'm feeling fancy. I'll wear my bucket.
That's my poop water bucket.
It's for specifically when it's a specific stool consistency. It's a very special bucket because that one's metal. And it'll eat through the fucking wood.
I like the ting.
Ting! Are you a fucking rabbit? Well, unfortunately, Louis's life was plagued with sickness since the time he was actually a child, living with an active case of tuberculosis for the last 16 years of his life. By the age of 40, he was entirely too weak to even teach, and was forced to quit his job as a professor. Since the school was now connected with a hospital, Louis Braille was basically forced from one building and just transferred to the other. He didn't have a long time in retirement, however, as he died 3 years later on January 6, 1852, just 2 days after his 43rd birthday. The Braille method was finally adopted by the school 2 years later in 1854, due to the insistence of Louis's former pupils who actually used his alphabet and were progressing with reading and writing at a much faster rate than their peers that still used the Howie or Barbier method. The next year in 1855, Pierre-François Victor Foucault, the man who was making that typewriter that allowed the blind to type, unveiled his invention at the 1855 World's Fair in Paris, using Braille's system, and a huge success. Now, historically, the French and English have not always been on the best of terms. Kind of think that they still aren't, in some ways.
No one's on good terms with the French.
And although Braille spread quickly throughout France, it didn't catch on to the rest of the Western world. And it wouldn't, unless the British gave it their approval. Well, it wasn't until it was tried by British physician Dr. Thomas Rhodes Armitage and given his praise at the 1873 European Conference for Teachers of the Blind that more countries decided to give Braille a try. And 10 years later, Dr. Armitage reported that the entire world was now using Braille except the United States. But don't worry, we'd come about on our own time. Not too much later, just like 50 years later. In 1932, an English version of Braille system was presented to the world. The best one. The American one.
Okay.
But even today, there's developments with the Braille language, as all languages are forever forming. There's now even Braille for coding and computer programming. The first biography...
So even the blind can make much more money than me.
Fuck. Don't put it that way. Man, that makes me sad. Even the blind are getting laid. The first biography of Louis Braille that I can find is from French author Alexandre René Pignier, who wrote about him in 1859, just 7 years after his death. He said that Braille and Barbier hated each other since Braille's system was really just an offshoot of Barbier's, but in reality, they liked each other just fine. They both wanted to help people, and that was really all they cared about. Although Barbier did try to perfect his own system up until his death in 1841 at the age of 73. Nowadays, Louis Braille has been celebrated the world over, commemorated on stamps and coins, and even having his own holiday on his birthday, January 4th, now known as World Braille Day. His former home in Couvray is now the Braille Museum. Today, there are 133 languages that support Braille. On the 100th anniversary of his death in 1952, Louis Braille's body was given the highest recognition in France by having his body transferred to the Pantheon in Paris, where he rests alongside the likes of Napoleon, Victor Hugo, Voltaire, and others. However, his hands were cut off and buried near his home in Couvray.
Whoa. Whoa, what happened? I'm sorry.
They buried his body in the Pantheon in Paris, but they cut off his hands and put them in near his home in Couvray.
Okay.
My sources today. Wikipedia.
Who did
the end? Who? I don't know who did it. I feel like it was planned.
Yeah, who's they?
Someone.
I mean, you look up the wrong shit, man. You know that?
What do you mean?
Like, you're like, oh, we're glossing over this. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Well, they chopped his hands off and fucking put it near his home in Couvray.
Oh, that sounds mildly interesting. Yep, you're not going to look into that anymore. Like,
that's all that there is to it.
No, there isn't. That's all that you looked up, you fucking piece of shit.
No, look, he worked a lot with his hands. His hands in his home are important to him, so they kept his hands.
To just bury the whole body there.
No, it was near there, but instead they wanted to induct him into the Pantheon in Paris, which, if you don't know, is where France's heroes are buried.
Uh-huh.
So, that's why he's with, Voltaire and Victor Hugo.
Okay, cool.
It's all of him except for
So was it like a practice
hands.
back in the day to like cut off various parts of people and distribute them to different places they lived in their lives and had influence?
Actually, kinda.
Really?
Galileo's fingers are... Yeah.
Oh, this is weird.
Yeah, it is weird, actually, but now that you bring it up, yeah, I've seen Galileo's fingers in a completely different spot than his body was.
Huh.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't think about that, but yeah, it was. Kind of was.
Okay, well that makes it make more sense that it wasn't documented as to like who in
but
the
I don't
fuck
think
did that.
I don't think that they were doing it so far as 1952 when they did it. Like, I don't know why they did it in 1952. That is weird. Anyway, when this episode releases, I'll actually be in France. And so hopefully I'll be... Well, it's not like I'm paying for it,
That's... You didn't stop flexing there.
Well, Basically, I'm hoping to see... I know, I love it. I'm hoping to see Louis Braille's body in the Pantheon. I've been in the Pantheon before, but I didn't know he was there or probably give a shit, so I just...
God, stop phrasing it like that. You sound like such an asshole.
I mean, this is like probably my... Are
you proud of yourself?
Fifth time. Yeah.
Are you proud of yourself?
Yeah.
Are you proud of what you wrote down and presented to the world today?
Yeah, why?
You, Jordan Rabel.
Yeah, why?
Oh, yeah, never mind.